poussais, je t'aime. Tu m'avais manqué, poussais, je t'aime, poussais, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré, poussais, je t'aime, poussais, je t'aime.
Hello there and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly chat show on European politics. I'm Maeve McMahon and this week we're broadcasting from Strasbourg, where MEPs met for their monthly voting session. Coming up, after weeks of gruelling hearings, the brand new European Commission took centre stage in Strasbourg this week. Now that they're approved, the 26 commissioners will work a bit like ministers in a national government, reporting to their boss, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. As incoming US President Donald Trump gets ready to deregulate, cut taxes and fire officials, we're asking how Brussels will keep up. And it's been described as the largest human rights case in EU history. The Hungarian government is in Luxembourg this month at Europe's top court, defending a law that it says protects children, but which in reality seems to collide with core European values by heavily restricting or even forbidding the portrayal of gay and transgender people. 16 EU countries have joined the Commission in opposing Budapest. MEPs looked at the situation for the LGBTQ+ community in Hungary this week and beyond. A warm welcome to our guests. Thomas Tobé, Swedish MEP from the European People's Party.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to have you. Kira Peter Hansen, Danish MEP from the Green Party. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Raquel García Hermida van der Valle, Dutch-Spanish MEP from the Renew Europe. So lovely to have you with us. But before, as always, we hear your thoughts, let's just get some more context on the main announcement from Strasbourg this week.
Half a year after the European election and 2 months before Donald Trump takes over, the new European Commission is ready to roll. Finally. After a lot of drama and intense negotiations to unblock all pending nominations, the European Parliament confirmed Ursula von der Leyen's team this week. This was made possible by a sort of coalition agreement between the centrist parties EPP, SD and Renew, who had patched up their differences and swallowed the remaining bitter pills. Notably excluded from this deal were the Greens, which is testament to the recent shift in Europe's political landscape from centre-left to centre-right. The big question now is, will the new Commission's policies cater to the new reality and become more conservative?
So there you have them, the brand new faces of Brussels, if you like. Raquel, what has been your reaction to this new Commission?
I'm happy that we have a commission. I'm happy that we have a coalition agreement. That was one of the main points for Renew. And I'm mostly happy that we can get to work, because we saw that Donald Trump was already packing his presumably golden-plated moving boxes to get into the White House, and we were still fighting here.
That's a crucial point. It's time to get to work. And we heard from Ursula von der Leyen today saying the transition period is over and the first 100 days will be crucial. Thomas Tobé, though, it's worth pointing out that just 370 MEPs voted in favour of this Commission. So very low compared to the support she got back in the summer with over 400 votes.
Yeah, I mean, it basically reflects, of course, that we see gaining support for populists, both to the right and to the left. And of course, they will, in a way, never be in favor of the Commission. And of course, that is a challenge that we have here in the European Parliament. But I think the most important thing is that we actually were able to deliver. And I must say, I think for anyone looking at European policy, we had election 5 months ago. I think citizens expect get to work.
Well, that's funny because today the European Parliament, earlier this week, the European Parliament President Metsola was saying how we're on time, you know, compared to 2019, we'll be able to start on the 1st of December with this new Commission. But for our viewers, they're, thinking it's been taking so long. But it's been interesting for you as a member of the Green Party. You were quite divided on whether to support this new Commission or not. Which way did you go in the end?
I voted in favour, and I think it's also important to note that none of the groups voted unanimously, except for the hard right and the hard left. But yes, for us it was important to show that there is a stable majority, especially to our colleagues in EPP, that we can make it work with a centrist Green to EPP majority. We see it's not stable without us, because clearly the deal has been broken. There weren't enough support among the three groups. So for us, it's about influencing the policies. We experience we can do that with von der Leyen, and I think looking at the political guidelines, it goes towards the Green, less towards the extreme right. So that's why.
But is there a lot of infighting now in your party?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think we're united at the fact that we don't want to see the Italian extremists in this commission as an executive VP, and then we disagree on how do we best ensure political influence, but also keeping out the far right and pulling EPP closer to the centre again.
Well, President von der Leyen stressed in her speech that the transition period was over and the first 100 days of office would be crucial, because after weeks of political limbo and concerns from many MEPs over the inclusion of far-right commissioners, she tried to put their worries to bed. Take a listen.
Overcoming divisions and forging compromises is the hallmark of a vivid democracy. And my message today is we want to work with you in that spirit. And as I said before the vote in July, we will work with all democratic, pro-European forces in this House. And as I've done in my first mandate, I will always work from the centre, because we all want the best for Europeans, and we all want the best for Europe, and it is time to come together.
So President von der Leyen, they're stressing how she would work with the centre, but does the Parliament still have a centre, Raquel?
Yes, we still have a centre, and we have shown that we can come together and work from content, from ideas, from our programmes, listening to one another, to what it's important for us. And for us, it was really important to have agreements on paper. We got that. We're very happy with the content. We're happy that we are respecting the Green Deal. We're happy that we're going to be working towards European defence. We're happy that we're going to be working towards respecting rule of law. There are very important things in there, and I fully agree with the colleague from the Greens. It's very important that we have a majority which can be a bit flexible with progressive forces, but I also think that we have to hold each other accountable, and I trust the colleagues from the EPP that they will respect the agreements.
Ciara, we heard Raquel mention the Green Deal there. We didn't really hear it as a top priority. The three top priorities from Ursula von der Leyen were security, democracy, prosperity. Green Deal really gone down on the priority list.
Yeah, and I think that's a shame, because we still have a climate crisis, and we see floods and heatings over in Europe. I think it's a reflection of the reality we're facing in different member states. In my own, climate was still the #1 for the European elections, but clearly it wasn't in other countries. And I think we as politicians responsible also for how we're handling the climate crisis have a responsibility to show that this is still something we need to do. I feel, however, though, she is still thinking about the climate. Now we don't call it a Green Deal, but a clean deal. For me, it's less important what we call it, as long as we see the actions.
Has green become a bit of a dirty word? And just on that note as well, on the green, we saw she has appointed Philippe Lambert, the very outspoken former head of the Greens, co-chair of the Greens. She has appointed him as her special advisor. So yes, there is still inklings there that she wants to keep this Green Deal or Clean Deal alive. But looking at you as an EPP member, with competitiveness right up there with the priorities alongside security and democracy, how do you strike that balance?
No, but I think it's very important to understand that for us, we feel a big responsibility. We were the big winners of this election, and trying to be humble, but that's the fact. And of course, it is a responsibility for us now to build constructive majorities. But to be serious, if you're going to build constructive majorities in this parliament, you also need ECR. We just had all the commissioner designate. If they were supposed to be approved, they also needed ECR support. And that is what I think is kind of lacking in when you comment on this, because we cannot think that, you know, they don't exist here. They are here in the European Parliament. People have voted for them. Some of them are, of course, impossible to work with, but they are also constructive MEPs. So for EPP, it is important to keep the pro-European forces together, but of course also we need to tackle the challenges that we have. Security, but with climate, of course, we also need to think about how is this affecting people? How can we have more economic growth? I mean, all those issues are important.
And the issues on voters' minds, if you look this week, you know, we've had elections in Romania last week, there's elections in Ireland this week, cost of living crisis, housing crisis, migration. These are the issues on people's minds.
Yes. But take the energy transition. It's directly linked to cost of living, but not in the way that it's sometimes presented by the right, particularly the extreme right. We see that as an opportunity to reduce our energy bills. And we have seen many examples of when you transition to green and clean energy, then the energy costs go down. And it improves our geopolitical situation in the world. We're not dependent of Putin. We're not dependent of other autocrats or wannabe autocrats. So it's really important that we also speak to voters as the intelligent people they are, and we make it very clear. You can present everything in terms of costs, but you can also present it in terms of opportunities and also the future of the planet as we want it to be, and not as something which just happens to us.
But it is also important what kind of decision politicians actually make. I mean, Germany is not here and they cannot defend themselves. But seriously, of course, the German decision to be so dependent on Russia, we can agree on that. But I would also argue to take away nuclear was, of course, a bad decision. Because they were thinking, let's go for renewables, which we have to, of course, invest in. But it became renewable and coal. I mean, we have to also take responsibility for what our policies have meant. And some of the policies have not been working in Europe. And that is what we see. That is the rise of the populists to the left and to the right.
And do we have that sense of urgency, Ciara, then around here? Instead of just oohing and awing at all the things happening, the reality on the ground in many member states where a lot of people are voting for non-traditional, for example, if you look at Romania in the presidential elections, Georgescu, who's very anti the European Union, very pro-Russia, he came out on top.
Yeah, and I think that's also due to the polarism and the populism we see in general. I think also the media plays a big role here because, of course, if you are in your own little echo corner on social media and you see one reality, be it it's only Trump or it's only Harris, we have a different, like we don't have a collective conversation about where do we want this country or the EU to go. So I think that's also hampering the democracy that we see in some of these member states. And I think what we are then lacking here also, I agree with much of what you're saying, that when we're discussing, for example, Russian energy dependence, we all know we're not doing it well enough. Like our sanctions aren't working functionally, our energy dependency is still high, we still send a lot of money for energy to Russia. So we still have a lot of urgency there if we actually want Ukraine to win and also secure the dependency from Russia.
And also let's maybe look at what we can do with what we know. We have, as Renew, we have asked to look very carefully into possible influence from Russia in the Romanian elections, because what happened was really strange and it was very much fueled by TikTok. So we really want to go to the bottom of this and try to see if there are foreign powers at this moment already interfering with our election results.
Yeah.
And then I think, if I may add, of course, we as politicians, and I would also call myself a centre politician, have a responsibility, because if you feel that the green transition are going too fast or you're losing your jobs and there is not a social security network to support you, we don't invest in skills, of course people turn to someone who can promise them something else, be it to the extreme left or the extreme right. So there we also have a common responsibility among the democratic parties to also ensure that the policies we're making here also have a positive impact.
And that's what people need at the end of the day. And we saw as well this week Ursula von der Leyen stressing that to have action we need unity, but of course we don't have a whole lot of unity. But just as you can imagine, there's been lots of reactions coming out all week to this new commission, and one that stood out was a tweet by Stefano Malia from the European Economic and Social Committee, which said, "Political declarations alone are not enough. Over the past few years, we've been misled by political slogans and declarations, often accompanied by flashy headlines for supposedly new initiatives. But what we're missing is concrete, actionable roadmap to guide our efforts." So just to translate some into the substance that we might see now coming out of this commission, while, of course, as you mentioned earlier, Donald Trump is preparing to appoint Elon Musk in charge of his efficiency department.
I think in any case, it's very concerning that there is obviously a conflict of interest between someone with extremely big interest in the private sector in deregulation, that person is put at the head of a department, any department anywhere in the world, in this case in the United States, so even more impactful for the rest of the world. But I also think that we have to look at that roadmap and that plan for the future. And what I just said, be very clear about that. I was really happy to hear von der Leyen speaking this morning about the capital markets union. And that seems very technical, but it's very simple. It's something that will allow our businesses, startups, also small businesses to thrive and grow within the European Union and not be pushed away by American businesses or Chinese businesses.
And that's precisely what Mr. Melia was referring to, Stefano. Also, he was saying, you know, we want a more business-friendly environment in Europe. We want to see red tape cut. But just, Thomas, when it comes to dealing with Donald Trump, should Ursula von der Leyen jump on a plane and head over to Palm Beach, just like the head of NATO did last week, Mark Rutte?
I think it is extremely important that we try to keep a good relation with US and with this new administration. For sure, there are going to mean a lot of challenges for us, it's clear, because one thing we know about Trump, he actually does what he says. So we need to prepare for that. But I mean, for us, we also have to draw some own conclusions. And I think one of the conclusions is, of course, we have to take responsibility for our own faith, you know. We cannot be so dependent on US, for example, on security issues. And when it comes to the business environment, of course, we have over-regulated in Europe. That has been our model.
We've shot ourselves in the own.
I mean, what we basically need is some kind of revolution, you know, in the Commission. You know, we have a machine of 30,000 people that need to think differently.
But Ciara, that's probably a problem for you, because if we deregulate, we're rolling back then on the legislation that we had put in place in order to reach our goals.
Well, I think what is important is that we assess, why do we have different legislations? Like, why do we have consumer protection? We have that because we want our consumers to be able to buy the products. And I'm not saying you want to get rid of consumer protection, but that's a bit the thing when we are saying, or Ursula von der Leyen is saying, we need to cut 25% of bureaucracy, or we need to, every time we introduce one legislation, take two legislations out, but you don't go into discussing what concrete legislation, because we don't want to get back to the financial crisis where all the banks failed, or get rid of consumer protection, or environmental
And it's the consumers, we will pay the price if we see this favourite word of Donald Trump, tariff, being used.
Yes, it will have enormous consequences for our economy, but something which we can control, and it doesn't depend on the United States. Look at the deforestation law. The most consumers in Europe, they don't want to go into supermarkets and have their products being produced at the cost of jungle and forest all around the world. And I think it's important that we keep those pieces of legislation, which were very good initially and are still very good, that we keep them as whole as possible, because it's something that will help biodiversity, and will help climate, and will help consumers, and will help our businesses, because there were a lot of businesses who were very much against modifying the deforestation law. In the Netherlands, it was all over the place. Big businesses, including supermarkets, including food industries, they were against modifying it because they had already made changes, they had already adapted.
And then it was a confusing signal then for the Commission to delay it. But I guess one concern as well for the previous Commission has been, really, they've been in crisis mode with Brexit, COVID, the energy crisis, and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So all eyes now on this brand new team. We've seen pictures of them earlier, and we wanted to find out from one expert, Ricardo Borges de Castro from the College of Europe, if there'll be any shining stars. Take a listen to his thoughts.
There's no really a big hitter in the College of Commissioners. Okay, you have Mrs. Callas, Mrs. Ribera. I think Piotr Serafin could be a surprise, but you really don't have any big hitters. So in a sense, it's going to be sort of, if I can use this expression, a domesticated commission. She's going to be in full control of the college, having sidelined all the opposition, all of the dissenting voices that she had in the previous college. So I think very much Mrs. von der Leyen is going to be the boss. Sometimes we talk about winners and losers in this type of situations. Mrs. von der Leyen and the EPP are clearly winners of the past couple of weeks. So I think she starts her position, or she starts her commission in a strengthened position. So I believe that at the start the commission is actually not weakened. I think it is actually strengthened.
So that is the take from Ricardo Borges de Castro from the College of Europe, basically saying that Ursula von der Leyen will be the boss. She does have her fingerprints pretty much on everything, and she's known for being quite controlling inside the Commission. What is your take as a member of her party?
But I mean, seriously, this is a result of elections. Elections in member states, elections at European level. So
But I'm talking about her management style.
Her management style. Well, I must say, I think Ursula von der Leyen has two things that make her a great leader. Firstly, she actually has an idea, and sometimes she even says things before others that are not popular. When she said, I think Ukraine actually should join the European Union, not many even in this house were in favor of that then. When she acted during the pandemic, for example, so she can show leadership. But then, of course, she is rather tough. And I mean, I want that. I want a leader in Europe to be tough, because we need that. And we need a commission that actually works. And I think she's been very clear what she expects from the commissioners.
Would you agree with that, Kira?
Yeah, I would. Now I don't know if I'm... No, but I think clearly also compared to Jean-Claude Juncker, like she's a much more competent and stronger leader. I think there's no doubt there. And I think some of the criticism is also gendered a little bit, that she's working too much, sleeping in her office, too bossy, whatever. I think, however, she's not as strong now as she were in July. She lost quite a lot in the election of the Commission. And she's also the Commission now with the least best result of all the commissions in past time. So she's been weakened a little bit today, I would say, because she didn't look to the center, but couldn't really figure out, or EPP didn't. I think actually she wanted, but part of your group wanted to look other ways. So she will have a hard time, I think.
She will have a hard time. And interesting, we didn't even get to mention the outgoing European commissioners who've been all taking to social media this week, showing images of them packing up their boxes and reminding their voters and Europeans what they've been up to. So we bid them the best for their future, and best of luck to the incoming commissioners. But for now, we can close this conversation. For more on the portfolios of all those commissioners, do take a look at euronews.com. Meanwhile, stay tuned to Euronews. We will be back very soon to tell you about a tense battle between the Hungarian government and many EU governments about gay and trans rights. See you soon. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, Euronews' weekly chat show with me, Maeve McMahon, coming to you from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where MEPs gathered to discuss, among other things, this: the Hungarian government under scrutiny in the European Court of Justice over the Child Protection Act that was enshrined into law back in 2021. According to the Commission, the law is a massive violation of EU rules, but Budapest says it aspires to stop paedophiles. But EU treaty experts and 16 governments say it stigmatises LGBTQI+ people by putting same-sex couples and paedophiles in the same bracket. The law bans gay people from featuring in school education materials and on TV shows for under 18. So this court case seems like a really big deal, especially given so many member states have joined the Commission in the ruling. What are your thoughts on it, Rika?
It's one of the biggest fundamental rights court cases up to date, and it's very nice to see that the Commission and member states are joining forces. And that's what we have also seen in the European Parliament in a recent debate about this, that EPP, Renew, S&D, Greens, the left joining forces, and the most horrible things being said in plenary by the extreme right, including ECR. The Italian ECR members made horrible statements. It was really difficult to hear. And that's why I want to call on the responsibility again of our colleagues from the EPP to be very clear about fundamental rights in our coalition agreement moving forward.
And it's an interesting point, because often it's finger pointing between Budapest and Brussels, i.e. the Commission. But here, this ruling, it has the backing of 16 member states as well. Yeah.
This is an awful law that we have. And what I think is more worrying is that we actually see a backlash now. We see this is not only in Hungary now. We see this in more countries in Europe happening.
In Bulgaria as well.
And, what we need to understand is, for Viktor Orban, he was once a liberal politician. He knows.
He was in your party.
Even in my party, but I have to say, I was very successful at kicking me out of my party, though.
You were responsible for that.
But seriously, they think like this. They can win election by targeting trans people, targeting gay people. It is a way for them to win election. And it's really disgusting. And for us, I think, as a union, we need to stand up for our values, because we are more than just the internal market and free trade. We are also a union of values.
Well, as I said, it was back in 2021 when this law was passed, and Prime Minister Viktor Orban back then said it was his way of protecting children from harmful content. He also insisted that he defended the rights of homosexuals, but that this law was about parents deciding what kind of sexual education their children should be given, Ciara. That's the response from Viktor Orban.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good propaganda camp, but clearly the actions on the ground speak louder than what Viktor Orban is saying. This is a way to make stereotypes, say that all LGBTI people are pedophiles, to take back the rights that we've gained over generations. As you're saying, this is a backlash. We see it not only in Hungary, but in Italy, Romania, and the US. We see the backlashes on women and LGBTI people. And I think it's very worrying. And where it becomes tricky from the EU side is now we have a rule of law mechanism, but it's not a rule of law mechanism we can use when countries are clearly breaching our values. It's when they're misusing the funds or being corrupt or whatever. So we need to find a way where we say, this is not only, as you said, Thomas, an internal market, this is also a political union with common values. If you don't like that, you're welcome to leave, but you need to abide by the rules that we all follow.
Well, it's interesting because the 16 member states I mentioned, they're mostly kind of central or like Nordic countries, very few in the east, because of course in the debate this week in Strasbourg, Bulgaria was also mentioned for their new law that they adopted in August.
Yes, and that's a law to the example of the Hungarian law, and we're seeing the same movements, like Ciara said, also in Georgia, in America. This is an international, well-organized, very well-funded movement, which we are now seeing in action here in the European Union, and I fully agree. The current mechanisms that we have are either working too slowly or not working at all, because we will have to wait 4.5 years before we know what the court rules on the Hungary case. Who knows about Bulgaria? So what we propose as D66 as Renew is make sure that you apply conditionality, which Ursula von der Leyen mentioned explicitly this morning, in a much faster way, that we are much more able to act swiftly so that these abuses are going to be stopped in their tracks immediately.
And one organisation, NGO in Brussels, who's been following this case very well is Reclaim. To get their take, we caught up with Esther Martinez. Take a listen.
We are seeing the anti-gender movement being very active in the European Union, organically, because there are reactionary forces in the European Union that already exist, but also because Putin has a destabilization campaign that scapegoats LGBTQ people to destabilize the European Union and its member states. So basically what we are seeing now is that these groups are more active and more successful than they previously were, and we are seeing bills such as the Hungarian one being replicated across the European Union. With Trump coming in the new administration, we think that this is only going to get worse.
Esther Martinez there expressing her concern for gay communities and, of course, transgender people. There's massive debates all across Europe regarding the rights of transgender care. We saw it as well. You mentioned Donald Trump.
I mean, for us, this is really about having the discussion, what is the European Union? And for me, the European Union is something to be proud of. We protect minorities, we protect people's lives. Of course, we can have some political differences, but this is another Europe that they are pushing for, and we have to stop it.
And what about your group? Would everyone agree with you?
Clear majority, not everyone, of course, but I mean, EPP, we have been pushing this agenda, and of course, I mean, as a Swede, of course, we perhaps are one of the more progressive delegations within EPP on this matter, but I'm not worried about my group at all, I would say, on this issue. I'm more worried about how these actors are using social media and to cause an opinion against people that keep pressuring us, and we see election results that are quite worrying.
I think that we have to look at social issues more broadly than we might do or might have done up until now, in the sense that being able and free to be who you are, it will increase your mental health. It will allow you to thrive. It will allow you to work. So social issues are not isolated. They are intertwined with everything that we do as European Union. And I fully agree with the colleague. We have to look at this from a perspective of values.
And on that point, we can conclude this conversation. Thank you so much to our guests for being with us. And as you said, Raquel, our ruling will be next year, so we'll keep you posted on that. Thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here on Euronews. Hello there, you're watching Brussels, My Love, your weekly update on European news. I'm Maeve McMahon, broadcasting from Strasbourg, where I'm joined by Thomas Tobey, Swedish MEP with the European People's Party, Kira Peter Hansen, Danish MEP from the Greens, and Raquel García Hermida van der Valle, Dutch-Spanish MEP from Renew Europe. Now this week, EU buildings were lit up in orange to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. MEPs here also joined a 16 Days of Activism campaign to fight for the elimination of gender-based violence. And on the back of this concerning conversation, another debate was held here in Strasbourg, and that was about the gender pay gap in the European Union, which in 2024 still looks far from being fixed. According to data from the European Commission, the pay gap in the EU is still at 13%, which means women would have to work almost 2 months more than men to make up that difference. Women on average earn 87 cents for every €1 earned by a man, and the gap decreased only by 2.8% in 10 years. So that's a lot of data to digest. It's not breaking news, because I feel like we have this conversation every year at the same time when this social media campaign goes viral, highlighting how women were now working for free. Why is this still the case, Raquel?
I think it has to do with structural issues, so how we have arranged the way that we work, but also with cultural issues. And girls, and I'm a mother of three daughters, so girls are also taught to be less assertive, to be nice, to be kind, to be not too outspoken. And I think that works through the rest of your life in the way that you approach a negotiation, for example.
So cultural issues, but of course companies have the responsibility as well. We'll get to that later. But Kira, as a female MEP here, have you seen a lot of women face major inequalities when it comes to accessing progression or rewards or...
Well, I was actually the rapporteur on the Gender Pay Transparency Directive in the last term. So I spoke with a lot of women who experienced discrimination on the basis of their gender. And I think the causes are both like cultural stereotypes, what do we expect from women? It's also an under-evaluation politically of how do we see a nurse's working conditions versus a mechanic's working conditions that create the gender pay gap across sectors and a gender-segregated market. And then especially now, I'm quite young, but my mom's generation, they've then had a pay difference in the beginning of their career that became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then in the end, now we see the pensions are much lower than their male counterparts. So I think now we can hopefully fix it for your daughters, Raquel, but for
I thank you. I thank you.
Let's not have this same conversation in 10, 20 years.
No.
And let's bring in another take from a gender pay gap expert who is the head of the Nine, which is a women's social club over in Brussels. We can take a listen to Georgia Brooks.
It is difficult for countries individually, and therefore the EU as a whole, to come in with a concrete set of plans. And I say this because we are looking at recommendations, we're looking at action plans, and the advice is solid. And there I think we are seeing that there's so much room for interpretation that at a countrywide level, companies, because it really is companies, have a lot of free rein. So there are some companies that do this because they believe in gender equality, they believe in paying women a fair wage, and then others that don't. And then if you have no penalties and there's no enforcement, ask yourself, what is the incentive?
So that's Georgia Brooks there, an advocate for gender equality. Thomas, we bring you in now, of course. She talks about the need for penalties, enforcement of companies. As Kira said, we do now have this directive that came in last year. It needs, of course, to be implemented. But will this be a game changer, do you think?
I don't know, to be honest. I think, this is a big political failure because also many women actually work in the public sector, something that actually we as politicians have quite much control over. And still you can see that the salaries are lower because it's dominated by women. So I think that perhaps could be the most important step to take, you know? raise the salaries, also in the public sector for women working in healthcare. Many are teachers and so on. And of course, we want more men to be teachers as well. But I mean, I see this, that there is another evaluation of the work that the women do, and we have to recognize this. Then, of course, you know, as a Swede, we have another way to regulate our labor market. You know, I don't like EU regulation on this, but I mean, I fully share. You know, I'm worried about this. I have a daughter myself. I want her to have the same possibility as my son has. And I fully agree also that, I mean, I really tried when I became a parent, you know, I'm going to treat them in the same way. I'm going to empower them as much as I can. But I don't know if I succeed, you know, because they meet something in society and things change, you know. It's really tricky.
Should we start publishing salaries?
I think we should. They have it in Norway, so now we're the full range of Scandinavians.
true.
And in the Pay Transparency Directive, we will also have to publish at least a pay gap. But we see collective agreements are the keys to closing the gender pay gap, and transparency is. And then adding on to what you said, Thomas, one of the issues is also that a lot of women are working part-time because you don't have daycare institutions that are functioning well enough. It's maybe too expensive. Families can't afford it. You have also tax systems where you tax the household and not the individual person. So there are a lot of economical structures as well that are keeping women outside of the labor market or making sure they only work part-time, which of course affects the salaries.
And the situation in the United States is even worse. I saw this week Disney had to pay millions in a lawsuit case because they were clearly paying a woman much less than a man for the exact same job. But in Luxembourg, it's a good situation. I believe it's the only EU country, Raquel, where women are earning slightly more than men.
Yes, and that might have to do with the sectors in which women are employed, but also good policies. And like Kira said, and I concur, and I said in the beginning, it's about making sure that women don't develop that pay gap at the beginning of their careers, and especially when they choose to form a family, to become mothers, because we do see that because women tend to work in lower paying sectors, when it comes to a choice between two partners, a man and a woman in this case, to decide who's going to maybe work less, it's easier economically for the woman to do that because she already earns less. So we have to make sure that we balance that out with good daycare and with good facilities, and ensuring that from the get-go that we don't have those gaps appearing.
Okay, well, on that conclusion, we can bring this conversation to an end. Thank you so much to our guests, Raquel for being with us, Kira, and also Thomas Thoy, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for watching. Any comment or any reaction to anything you've heard, please reach out. Our email address is brusselsmyLove@euronews.com. You can also send us a direct message on social media and we will get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon on Euronews.